Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, we're talking about something that happens to every elk hunter at some point. For some of us, a lot more than sometimes. Getting busted. If you've hunted elk for more than a few days, you've probably had it happen. You're slipping through the timber, easing into a setup, and you're thinking this could be it. Maybe you hear cows mewing, or you catch the glint of antlers through the brush, your heart rate spikes, every step feels like it matters, and you're already picturing how this might go down. Then, in a split second, it unravels. The crash of hooves explodes through the drainage. You catch the flash of tan hides as they vanish into the dark timber. Maybe there's a sharp bark or a frustrated bugle that echoes as they put distance between you and them. And then, just like that, the woods go silent again, and you're left standing there with that pit in your stomach asking, now what? This just happened to me this morning. It's September 2nd, and I got busted. But here's the truth. It happens to all of us. Every single elk hunter, no matter how skilled, how experienced, or how careful, has been busted. Elk have incredible senses, and the mountains are their home turf. They win way more encounters than we do, and that's okay, because the goal isn't to win every setup. The goal is to learn from each one and use it to increase your odds the next time you're in striking distance. If it was easy, it wouldn't be fun. Now, here's the part that most guys miss. Just because you got busted doesn't mean the hunt is over. A blown setup isn't always final. In fact, a lot of times how you respond after that moment makes all the difference between walking back to camp empty-handed or salvaging the opportunity and maybe even notching your tag. Elk don't always run to the next county. Sometimes they only go a few hundred yards. Sometimes they pause. Sometimes they regroup in predictable places. If you handle that situation right, you might still be in the game. In this episode, I'm going to break down exactly what to do when elk bust you. I'll walk you through how to settle yourself down instead of reacting in panic. I'll talk about how to figure out why it happened in the first place, because not all busts are the same. I'll cover how to relocate those animals, how to predict where they're headed, and how to adjust your setup so you can cut them off rather than just chase them blindly. We'll also get into when calling might help you turn things around and when you're just wasting your breath. And maybe most importantly, I'll show you how to reset your mindset so you don't spiral into frustration or give up too early. I'll give you real practical examples of what this might look like in the field so you can visualize the situation and apply the tactics right away. Because the truth is, getting busted doesn't have to be the end of your hunt. It can be the start of the next opportunity if you know how to handle it. We've got to make sure we don't panic and let the dust settle. The natural reaction when elk blow out is to panic. You hear the thunder of hooves, branches snapping, maybe even a bark or a bugle, and your gut tells you to do something right now. You want to move, to chase, to fix it immediately before the hurt is gone for good. But here's the reality. If you move too fast, you usually make things worse. When elk spook, they're acting on survival instinct, but that doesn't always mean they're gone forever. If you can resist the urge to react right away, you give yourself a much better chance to stay in the game. Elk are prey animals, right? And like all prey, their first instinct when startled is to create space between themselves and whatever spooked them. That space doesn't always have to be miles. In fact, a lot of the time, they'll run just far enough to feel safe, then stop to reassess. The key factor here is why they spooked. If they didn't get your wind, there's a good chance they'll settle quickly. A cow that catches a flash of movement might bolt 150 to 200 yards, then pause and mew. A raghorn might run up a ridge and stop to look back within minutes. Even a herd bull, though he'll often push his cows further, doesn't always abandon the drainage. If scent wasn't involved, patience gives them time to calm down and gives you the chance to reset. Think about it like this. Elk live in a world full of constant disturbances. Predators, other elk, falling branches, even hikers. If they fled every time and never came back, they'd burn too much energy and too much country. That's why in many cases they don't leave for good. They just need a moment to feel secure again. How long should you wait? If you pause before making your next move, how long should that be? A good rule of thumb is at least 10 to 20 minutes. That might feel like forever when adrenaline is surging and you're convinced that the elk are halfway across the mountain. But most of the time, they aren't. That window allows them to stop, regroup, and maybe even start vocalizing again. If it was cows or younger bulls, they often relax more quickly. Within 10 minutes, you might hear soft mews or light movement. If it was a herd bull with cows, he's likely to push them a little further before slowing down. But even then, it's rare for the whole group to just leave the entire country, Your job in that waiting period is to stand still. Control your breathing and listen. The mountain has a rhythm, and if you're patient, you'll start to pick up those little cues. A stick breaking, a hoof scrape, or a faint call. That'll tell you where the elk settled. Let's put it into real-world picture. Imagine you're sneaking along the edge of a meadow at first light. You're trying to slip into position when a cow catches a flicker of your movement. She freezes, then lets out a sharp bark. In an instant, the group bolts into the timber, crashing and scattering. Instead of chasing right away, you freeze. You don't move a muscle. You wait 15, maybe even 20 minutes. At first, it's dead silent and your mind is racing, but eventually you hear faint mews and the sound of branches breaking further up the slope. That's your signal. They didn't run a mile. They just shifted to a safer pocket of cover. Because you held back, you still have a chance to adjust and get back in the game. Patience is your ally in the elk woods. When you're busted, don't panic. Don't rush. Let the dust settle. Elk that are bumped but not completely blown out are still huntable. If you slow down, assess, and listen, you might discover that your hunt isn't over at all. It's just entering the next phase. We've also got to figure out why it happened. When elk bust you, the most important question to ask yourself is simple. Why? Not all busts are created equal, and if you lump them all together as "I messed up," you're missing the lesson. Understanding the reason behind the spook gives you a roadmap for what to do next, and just as important, what not to do. The three big causes of a bust are these. Most blow-ups in the elk woods come down to one of these things: wind, sight, or sound. Each one triggers a different level of response from the animals, and each requires a different recovery strategy. If it's the wind, it's a non-negotiable. If elk wind you, it's the toughest situation to recover from. Their nose is their number one defense mechanism, and it's unbelievably sharp. They trust scent above all else. Once they get a good whiff of human odor, there's no calling trick or careful stalking that's going to convince them it wasn't a threat. What usually happens is a herd bull gets one whiff, and they'll often put serious distance between themselves and that spot. They'll head over a ridge, drop into the next drainage, or relocate to an entirely different bedding area. What you should do is not chase them. You'll just keep pushing them further. Instead, use the experience as a lesson in how the wind is moving in that terrain. Mark it in your head or on your map. At 9 a.m., the wind in this draw was already pulling uphill. That information is gold for the next setup. The second one is sight, right? Movement is what gets you. Elk are built to detect movement. Their eyesight isn't as sharp as a deer's in terms of detail, but they're actually, excellent at picking up motion, even the small stuff. A hand shifting, a bow limb flashing in the sun, or a silhouette where there shouldn't be one can all trigger a spook. What usually happens if an elk sees motion without smelling you is they often bolt a short distance, then stop to reassess. They may blow out temporarily, but not abandon the area. What you should do is freeze immediately. Don't compound the mistake by scrambling. If they didn't wind you, you still have a chance. Sometimes staying still can work in your favor to bring them back within range. A lot of times, if we bust elk, my first instinct is I kneel down. I want to get away from their eyesight as much as possible. I'm just going to slow it down and assess what's going on here. Now, the last big culprit that gets you busted is noise. Elk are noisy animals themselves. They crack branches, kick rocks, and shuffle through brush all the time. So while an unnatural sound can alarm them, it's the most recoverable mistake you can make. What usually happens is a stick snaps. They spook 50 to 100 yards, then stop. If no scent is involved, they might circle back, especially if you blow a few soft cow calls. So what you should do is just play it cool. Wait a moment, then toss out a mew or two. Sound-based busts can sometimes even be turned into opportunities because elk may come looking for what they thought they heard if they think it was an elk, right? A lot of times, the reason that sound can get you busted is because you make a sound and then you keep moving, and when that sound had happened, the elk are picking their head up and they're frozen and they're looking, and your movement is what's going to get you busted. If you make noise, freeze, hold still, right? If, for an example here, let's say you're slipping through a patch of dark timber late in the morning. You misstep and snap a dry stick. The bull you didn't even know was bedded nearby and he crashes off. If you chase him, he'll just keep going. But if you wait, freeze, toss out a couple of soft mews and listen, you might hear him bugle from 200 yards away. He's still in the area. That busted moment isn't the end, it's just a reset. When elk bust you, don't just throw up your hands and say they're gone. Ask yourself what caused it. Was it wind, sight, or sound? The answer tells you everything about whether you should reset and shadow them, or sit tight and call, or chalk it up as lost opportunity and move on. Learning to diagnose your bust is one of the fastest ways to grow as an elk hunter. Every mistake becomes a lesson, and every lesson makes you harder to beat the next time you step into the mountains. Let's also talk about relocating busted elk, because here's something a lot of hunters get wrong. When elk bust out of a setup, they don't vanish into thin air. They don't teleport to the next mountain range. They go somewhere. And if you can figure out where that somewhere is, you're still in the game. The trick is shifting your mindset from chasing elk to anticipating elk. Elk are survival experts, but they're also creatures of habit. When spooked, they usually follow predictable escape routes based on terrain, pressure, and their daily needs. If you can read the landscape and understand elk behavior, you'll know where to look. Feeding busts. If you bump elk off a meadow or feeding bench, they often run for the nearest security cover, usually timber just above or adjacent to the feeding area. They want shade and a line of sight behind them, not a 3-mile sprint. If it's a bedding bust, if you push into a bedding area, elk might relocate to an alternate bedding site. These are often on north-facing slopes, benches, or ridges with heavy cover. They want comfort and security, but they don't abandon an entire basin just because you blundered. If it's a water bust, elk bumped at a wallow or water hole, they usually move to secondary water or into bedding cover nearby. They'll come back eventually, but timing is everything in here. During migration season, late in the year, especially late October, pressured elk will often use, well-established migration trails. If you bump them here, they may move into staging areas or low elevation security cover, right? Try not to trail them, parallel them. The number one mistake a lot of hunters make after a bust is to charge right in on the same trail that elk just used. All that does is push them further. Elk are hyper aware of what's behind them when they're on the move. If you're following directly, they'll keep feeling that pressure and keep running. A smarter move is to circle wide, get downwind, use ridges or drainages to mask your approach, and parallel their line of travel. You're not trying to catch them, you're trying to intercept them where they're likely to settle. Let's paint some pictures here. A morning meadow bust. You bump elk from a feeding meadow at first light. Instead of trailing their tracks into the timber, you swing wide downwind and drop into the shaded bench you know connects to their bedding slope. An hour later, you hear soft mews there. The herd relocated right where you predicted. If it's a midday bedding bust, you slip too close to a bedding area and cows explode out. Instead of tearing after them, you loop around to the next north-facing slope. Within 30 minutes, you glass them, filtering into the thick cover. Waterhole busts. You bump a bull off a wallow at midday. Rather than sit on that wallow again, you quickly move toward the next pocket of timber where water is nearby. He might circle back that evening, or he may choose the next closest water. Either way, you've got options. You got to think like an elk. The way to stay in the game is to ask, if I were an elk, where would I go to feel safe right now? Usually the answer is cover, elevation change, or distance from pressure, but rarely is it the next county. Remember, elk live in defined home ranges. Unless the bump was extreme, they stick close. Your job is to stay calm, read the terrain, and move into position ahead of them. Relocating busted elk isn't about chasing, it's about predicting. Elk don't just run for no reason, they run to something. If you can figure out what that something is in your area, bedding, water, cover, migration corridors, you can often turn a blown stalk into a second chance. So don't waste energy sprinting after them, swing wide, parallel their path, and try to cut them off where they're headed. That's how you turn a bust into another opportunity. When elk bust you, one of the big questions hunters wrestle with is, should I call right now? Some guys hammer their bugle tube the second elk run. Others throw out cow calls in a panic. Most of the time, both approaches just make things worse. The truth is, calling after a bust can work, but it has to be done with the right read on the situation. Sometimes calling can calm elk and give you a shot at salvaging the encounter. Other times, it only confirms their fear and drives them further away. The trick is knowing when to use it, when not to, and how to sound believable. Let's start with the hard rule. If elk winded you, don't bother calling. Once elk get human scent, their decision is made. They aren't curious anymore, they're convinced. And you're not going to bugle or mule your way out of that. In this case, the best move is to just let them go, learn from the wind mistake, and reset in a new position for later. Calling shines when the bust was caused by sight or sound instead of scent. If it's a sight-based bust, if a cow catches you moving or a bull sees something he doesn't like, they often bolt a short distance but stop to reassess. Tossing out a soft cow call or a lost calf mew can convince them you're just another elk. If it's a sound-based bust, if you snap a stick or knock a rock loose, elk might spook briefly, maybe. If you follow that with natural elk sounds, soft mews, light herd talk, you can smooth things over. Elk make noise too. Something that's cover call helps them accept the disturbance as elk. Keep it soft. This isn't the time for challenge bugles or aggressive sequences. Subtle, believable cow sounds are best. You've got to be patient. Don't start calling immediately while elk are still crashing away. Give them a few minutes to stop, settle, and listen. Sound like you belong. Short mews, contact notes, or a lost calf call can suggest we're still elk here. That's enough to sometimes stop a herd or even pull them back closer. Also know when to shut up. If you don't get a response after a few calls, go silence. Chasing them with noise only drives them further and educates them. If it's a movement bust, you're set up on the edge of timber and a cow catches your draw. She bolts and the herd runs 100 yards. You wait, then toss out 2 soft calf mews. After a pause, you hear a cow mew back. They didn't leave for good. You quietly reposition and shadow them to their new spot. If it's a noise bust, you're slipping down a ridge and step on a dry branch. The bull crashes 200 yards. Instead of charging after him, you wait 5 minutes, then throw out soft herd talk. A bugle answers from uphill. He's spooked, but he's still in the game. Calling after a bust isn't about desperation, it's about communication. If they spooked from wind, save your breath. If they spooked from sight or sound, subtle cow talk can sometimes calm them down, stop them in their tracks, and even bring them back within range. The key is reading the situation honestly, keeping it natural, and resisting the urge to overdo it. Sometimes a single soft mew is all it takes to turn panic back into opportunity. Of all the things that happen when elk bust you, the hardest one to overcome isn't the noise of hooves or the sight of tails vanishing into timber. It's the battle in your own head. Getting busted feels like failure, and if you don't reset your mindset, it can unravel your entire hunt. When elk blow out, a lot of hunters spiral into frustration. You replay the mistake over and over. I moved too soon. I drew at the wrong time. I should have been 20 yards lower. Pretty soon that frustration turns into doubt, and doubt kills more hunts than bad wind ever could. Here's the perspective shift. If you're getting busted, that means you're in elk. You've already done 90% of the work right. You found them, you got close, and you forced them to make a decision. That's not failure, that's progress. Every blown encounter gives you valuable intel. Instead of sulking, ask yourself, what did I just learn? Did they win me? Now you know how thermals move in that drainage at that time of day. Did they see me? Now you know which approach angles expose your movement. Did they hear me? Now you know how noisy that patch of timber is and how careful you need to be next time. Elk hunting is a game of constant adjustments. Each mistake teaches you something that makes the next encounter more likely to succeed. If it's a morning bust in a meadow, you push too close at first light and bump elk feeding. Instead of walking back to camp, you realize they were here at dawn. Tonight, if the wind holds, I'll set up on the opposite edge. What felt like failure becomes a game plan for your evening hunt. Wind shift at midday timber? You stalk into a bedding area and suddenly the wind switches. The elk blow out. Instead of giving up, you mark that wind pattern in your notes. Tomorrow you circle in from a different angle. The bust taught you how that slope works. If it's a noise bust on a ridge, you snap a branch. The bull runs, but you hear him bugle later from another pocket. Lesson learned. Slow down even more in that kind of timber. The number one difference between hunters who fill tags and hunters who go home empty-handed is persistence. We've talked about this before. Grit. Most guys just quit too early. They hunt 2 or 3 days, get busted a couple of times, and convince themselves the elk are gone or the unit is no good. Meanwhile, the bulls are still out there, and the guys who stay mentally tough are the ones who capitalize. A busted encounter isn't the end of your hunt. It's just part of the process. Every time elk spook, you're learning, adapting, and getting sharper. The hunters who reset, stay positive, and keep grinding are the ones who notch tags year after year. So when elk bust you, don't beat yourself up. Take a breath, file away the lesson, and get right back into the fight. Persistence is what wins in elk country. At the end of the day, getting busted is just part of elk hunting. It happens to beginners, it happens to veterans, and it'll happen to you again no matter how many years you've been at this. The key is how you respond. If you panic, chase, or give up, the encounter really is over. But if you slow down, learn from the mistake, and think like an elk, you've still got a chance. Remember, most of the time, those animals didn't run to another state. They just shifted into the next pocket of cover. And if you're patient, you can still be in the game. Every blown stalk teaches you something about the wind, about movement, about sound, and about how elk respond under pressure. Those lessons stack up, and the hunters who stick it out, who keep grinding after a bust, are the ones who notch tags consistently. So the next time elk blow out on you, don't look at it as the end of your hunt. Look at it as the next step in your education, the next layer of grit you're building, and maybe even the beginning of another opportunity waiting just up the ridge. If you're serious about becoming a better elk hunter and want more than just these free videos, check out Team Backbone and the membership we offer at backboneunlimited.com. As a member, you're going to get 20% off site-wide, an exclusive t-shirt mailed to you every month, full access to the members-only content vault packed with backcountry strategy, fitness mindset, and gear planning resources, entry into monthly gear giveaways, a private Facebook group with direct access to me, and a community of like-minded hunters. Team Backbone isn't just a membership, it's a movement. It's built for the hunters who refuse to quit, who want to sharpen their edge, and who know mental toughness matters just as much as a good tag in your pocket. Thanks for being here. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.